I was sworn into office on the 7th of October 2013.
Okay. All right. So I want to go back a little bit. I mean, you know, you served for 25 years.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your choice to go into the Army. I mean, how did that kind of come about?
I was raised a military kid. I lived on military bases growing up. In fact, I was born at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is the home of the 101st Airborne Division, the Band of Brothers, the famous Band of Brothers. And so it was probably always in my blood. And when I graduated from high school right here in Montville, Connecticut, my father walked in one morning and dropped this big packet on the kitchen table and said, "Here, kid, fill this out." And that was my retired Sergeant First Class dad basically saying, "I think you ought to go to West Point." Went to West Point, graduated, and then served for 25 years.
Okay. Served for 25 years. The years that you served from, do you know?
I was commissioned out of West Point in May of 1987, and I retired in November of 2011.
All right. Deployments in that time?
Deployed all over the world. Some training deployments to places like Thailand, some observer deployments to places like Bosnia, and combat deployments to the Middle Eastern Theater of Operations, primarily Iraq.
Okay. And numerous times? I mean...
Yeah, I had a cumulative total of about 48 months deployed to Iraq over a period of about 4 years during the Global War on Terror, plus 7 months way back in 1991 during Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm.
All right. Climbing the ranks. I mean, did you ever see yourself getting to, you retired as a colonel, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, just talk to me a little bit about that.
So there was a day right after I got accepted into West Point that I can remember like it was yesterday, driving down I-395 with my brother, who is also a tribal council member. And he asked me this very question in 1982. And I said, well, I think I'll probably serve for 5 years because that's the obligation, that's what you have to do. And then I'll probably come back home here to southeastern Connecticut and run a gym. I really enjoyed what I was doing. I enjoyed leading people. I enjoyed the teamwork and the camaraderie and the warrior ethos that wrapped around you when you were in the service. And at every opportunity to stay or go, I found myself just staying and taking on more responsibility and just loving what I did.
Toughest thing about being a leader?
In an organization like the United States Army, which is really, if you were to compare it to corporate America, it's the largest corporation in America, larger than Ford Motor Company or anyone else. There are obviously, there's institutional traction. And I think the most important thing that I learned is, as a young leader, and certainly as you progress, you have to be the one who's on the lookout for the individual inside of such a large bureaucratic organization. You know, there are rules and policies and procedures that will ensure that the institution survives and thrives, but who's looking out every single day for each and every individual soldier and their needs? Because frankly, you know, the Army and all the services are about accomplishing the mission, but somebody has to be concerned about the welfare of your subordinates.
How many people did you lead? Did you head up?
Well, you know, my first duty was as a rifle platoon leader, and I was in charge of about 38 young men in an infantry unit. That progressed to about 140 as a company commander, about 600 or 700 as a battalion executive officer, and about 700 to 1,000 when I was a battalion commander in Baghdad in Iraq. Then I served a tour in northern Iraq as a deputy brigade commander, where I was the second in charge of an organization that had 4,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in it. And then ultimately I retired as a base commander, running an installation that took care of 20,000 soldiers and their family members. So basically a small city of about 50,000 people.
Losing men and women. You know, we all hate to talk about it. I've talked with Justin about it.
Yeah.
You know, you sign up for this, you think you're going to do your 5 years, and then you watch it grow over 25 years, and even how war changed in that amount of time. I mean, losing people. Just talk a little bit about that.
Everything that you just said. You know, so you enter the service, as you said, knowing full well that, you know, there are hazards of your chosen profession, as the Ranger Creed says, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession. And you do prepare for it. I mean, you literally drill and prepare for that moment when a young man or woman yells medic. And so you're conditioned to respond the right way. And you compartmentalize, and you do the right thing in the moment to take care of the lives of those young men and women that are under your charge. And it's almost automatic. But then after the action is complete, you start putting it all back together again in your mind, and it's never quite right, and you're always second guessing yourself. And you know, one of the things that I think strikes hard at the heart and soul of a lot of young men and women coming back from these last 15 years is survivor guilt. There's some remorse there when you feel like there must have been one more thing I could have done, or one thing that I shouldn't have done that caused it to happen. That is probably the most difficult part about it. And then just on a very personal level, you know, every unit at the battalion level and above has an assigned chaplain. So I had my own battalion chaplain, and he was a good sounding board, you know, a good person to have who was never directly in command or in charge of any of my 700 soldiers, but knew every one of them and touched every one of them on a daily basis. And I said to him at one point in Baghdad, I said, you know, chaplain, when the day comes, because we know it's gonna, that we lose a soldier, I don't want to ever have to say, who was that? Or, oh, not him. And because either one of those would be devastating. And, you know, as it seems to be the case, it was always, oh no, not him. Our country really can't understand the treasure that's been lost, the great young men and women, and what they could have been and achieved, and what they sacrificed for their country.
The importance, you know, you come back, you retired, now you're here, you're a leader in a different way. How did Vets Rock come to your attention? You know, I guess thinking back, I don't even know like the initial conversations and how everyone got involved. So maybe talk about the beginnings of the idea and why it was important for you to support it.
Yeah. So I always knew, you know, after retirement, in fact, I pretty much had made a commitment to myself that in some way, shape, or form, I would forever remain involved in supporting the causes of our nation's veterans. Just, I knew that it would happen. And then I arrived here, and, you know, we have an enormous amount of throw weight as the Mohegan Sun, certainly as the Mohegan Tribe, but from a business standpoint here at the Mohegan Sun, we have job opportunities, we have convention space, we have all that it takes to create excitement and energy about something, anything, you pick it. Selling cars at Barrett-Jackson, having a barbecue festival out on an asphalt lot in the middle of the hot summer. We put things on here and people come. And so I just happened to be introduced to a young man who also served in the 10th Mountain Division at the same time that I did, although in different units, Justin Nash. And he and I had a lunch downstairs in Tuscany behind the waterfall one day, and we both knew we were on to the same thought process, which is, you know, if you use the analogy of flypaper, all we have to do is drop this flypaper down and people are going to stick to it. We can put something together here that's going to work. And when we first discussed the idea, it was sort of along the lines of, you know, the Feed the World or Farm Aid concerts, right? Something that raised social consciousness, social awareness about veterans' causes, and had some sort of entertainment value wrapped around it at the same time. We plodded through those first few months very slowly, trying to figure out what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. Frankly, our first year out of the gates last year, we weren't sure whether we were going to succeed or not. I think we did quite well enough, in fact, that this year we've upped the ante and we see nothing but continued progress going forward.
Yeah, I mean, and just touching upon that, any doubts after last year? You know, were there meetings afterwards like, okay, we need to change this or fix this? You know, he and I have talked about how his organization has changed so much in a year.
Right.
But the event itself.
Right. Well, I'll tell you this much. In anything that we do here, and anything that I ever did in the Army, we always conducted the classic after-action review to determine the pitfalls and the pros and the cons and what to change. And while all of that has occurred, and we can talk about some of that, the one thing that I can say is we accomplished exactly what we meant to accomplish last year, and I can give it to you in a couple of vignettes. When the concert was over last year, I was walking along the concourse trying to make my way out, and I think I got stopped on 3 or 4 different occasions by 3 or 4 people, none of whom knew the other that had previously stopped me. And each and every one of them said to me, "Thank you." And they didn't say thank you because they got a job that day, or a suit from the Suits for Troops, or because they had a free concert ticket, or any of that. Every one of them said, "Thank you for bringing us all together on this day to make people see us and recognize us." I mean, that was probably the most powerful thing that happened. And when you peel away all the layers of the complexities of putting this event together, it was a huge success for that reason, and it'll keep being a success.
Veterans, you know, you served, you're serving alongside. Now you're tapped into an even bigger world out there.
Yeah,
and you know, one that often goes forgotten. I think, you know, there's a push here to try and get past that.
Right.
But you know, just talk about that. You know, you're talking to and helping people who served before your time.
Right.
Before, you know, or perhaps when your father did.
Yeah.
And so the outreach. Just talk about the outreach.
Yeah, you know, this is a cyclic pattern in our nation's history, that we go to war and everybody gets behind the war effort, and then the war fades and there's a drawdown and less people serve and it's peacetime and everyone forgets until the next time that the nation's warriors are needed again. And it's in those interim periods that it's even more important, and it's something that Justin and I talked about in the very first meeting we had, that it was important that we strike while the iron's hot, in that people are paying attention today, because we are still, although in a different phase, we are still engaged in Iraq and Afghanistan, and people are paying attention to some degree. But you can feel it almost now, that people are starting to lose their desire to pay attention to what's going on. A service member was killed in Iraq about 2 weeks ago. I wonder how many people really know that. So the idea of getting traction now is important, and the fact that our outreach goes through the generations is critically important as well. And in fact, this year, specific to that point, we're going to host the Wall That Heals, which is a half-size replica of the actual monument down in Washington, D.C. So lest anybody think all we're trying to do is help young men and women coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan to get a job, we're recognizing every era of veteran, and that Wall That Heals is going to be a very touching and purposeful part of what we do this year.
Diversity in the service. I mean, here you are, you know, head of a tribal council. Talk to me a little bit about the history that you know of anyway, or were there challenges there being a Native American joining the services?
Tough question.
Yeah.
I don't have a clean answer to that one. This one might go in the outtakes. Kathy's seen some of my outtakes.
Think about it for a second.
Yeah. This is a super. I don't think I can answer this question. I mean, because look, the deal is,
Does it matter when you're in the service?
Does what matter?
Who you are, where you come from, are you all the same once you're there?
I can start from there.
Yeah.
On this.
You're trying to help.
Yeah, I can start from there. The United States Army, I can speak to directly, and I'm sure it extrapolates across all the services. I'm positive that it does. Is probably the most equal opportunity employer in the United States of America. And you know, we draw upon young men and women from around the country, from around all demographics, to serve their nation, and everyone is well represented. I will make note, for those that don't know, that Native Americans serve at a rate 6 times higher than any other demographic or ethnic group in the United States. But once you get inside that Humvee and you're rolling down Route Irish, on the western side of Baghdad, and you all know that something could blow up at any minute. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, what language you speak in your free time, what your sleep habits are. None of those things matter because you are a team, and there is no place in the world, and I'll be parochial about it, than the United States Army to be in an organization where your race, your creed, your color doesn't matter. Your politics don't matter. You are there for each other every minute of every day, and I think it's a lesson for the rest of our country that these veterans that are coming back out of service and will be integrated into their workplace carry the right kind of demeanor to handle all situations.
My last question is usually, and I probably asked you this last year too, final thoughts, things you think are important to share as we're heading into this event, anything that we just talked about. You know, if you have a message to veterans out there who maybe are struggling, what would you say?
Well, you know, a large part of the reason why I am personally involved in this effort is because I feel an obligation to those. Really, if I think of the most constructive part of my career, it was in combat with that battalion of 700 to 1,000, and though I may never actually see any of those men and women again, I feel an obligation to every single one of them, and I will for the rest of my life. And they all know that, and they reach out to me, and I help them when I can. But that obligation doesn't stop with those 700 to 1,000. And I'm proud of the fact that we as a Mohegan tribe and the great staff here at Mohegan Sun who embraced this event last year, that we're all here to be ready and available to reach out to any veteran that needs to come and avail themselves of the services that we're going to provide at the event, and to have a good time and enjoy the concert that we're going to have that evening.